The age-old concept of the divine right of kings allowed that a country's ruler received his or her power or authority from God. However, few, if any, were delusional enough to actually believe themselves to be a god. An exception to this was Alexander the Great of Macedon. In 334 BCE, at the age of 22, he and his army crossed the Hellespont and embarked on a decade-long journey to conquer the Persian Empire. As a supposed descendant of Achilles, Alexander believed his final victory over King Darius III was his destiny. By the time of his death in 323 BCE, he was convinced that he was not the son of King Philip II, but instead was the son of the omnipotent Greek god Zeus. There are some who do not look upon Alexander as great. They dismiss his perpetrated divinity and question his ruthless nature, particularly his responsibility for the deaths of thousands. However, whether he actually considered himself a god is overshadowed by how he is remembered in history. Regardless of how is considered by others, he personally believes himself to be a deeply religious individual. To him, Zeus was the father of all mankind, not just the Greeks and Macedonians, but also the Persians, Egyptians, and Indians. As he crossed Asia, he remained open-minded about the barbarians and their customs. He even made a sacrifice to the Egyptian god Apis at Memphis. Although he may have respected their religion and culture, he still believed in the superiority of the Greek civilization, and to him, Aristotle, his old tutor, was the leading exponent of that Greek culture. To Alexander, the gods of the Olympus were present everywhere and their wishes were revealed to men through oracles and omens. This can be seen from his respect for the oracles at Delphi and Siwa. Alexander respected the rich history of the Greeks, sleeping with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow. He believed in both the labors of his forefather Heracles and the exploits of his mother's ancestor Achilles. He sacrificed daily and even organized festivals as he traveled through Asia. Because of his victories were sanctioned by the gods, before and after each battle he would pray and sacrifice to them. From his father, Alexander inherited a highly disciplined army, and like his father, the Macedonian king was a great military commander. He was both a brilliant strategist and a tactician. History tells us that he never lost a battle. His admirers claimed he had the uncanny ability to quickly evaluate his enemy and make a decision. Even at the young age of 18, he demonstrated this remarkable talent when he joined his father in 338 BCE against the Athenians in Caronia. During the height of the battle, he was even able to surround and defeat the famed sacred band of Thebes. After Philip's death in 333 BCE, Alexander realized at the age of 20 that before he could cross Asia Minor to fulfill his father's vision of conquering Persia, he had to win the supporting army. Standing alongside Philip's trusted commander Antipater, he faced an assembly of Macedonian troops. Many of these veterans were very tired of war, and Philip's death meant that the possibility of war had ended. As he stood before them and cried, Alexander promised to each of them glory and riches. To a man they swore their loyalty. Throughout the long days and months marching across the deserts of Asia, Alexander continually earned the respect of his men. They saw a commander who withstood the hardships and dangers alongside them, fighting beside them, eating when and what they ate, and refusing water if there wasn't enough for everyone. Unlike his counterpart King Darius, he led his men from the front. This sometimes careless concern from his own well-being would cause him to be wounded 8 times. Over the next few years, Alexander and his army would be victorious at Granicus, Issus, and Tyre. An incident occurred after Issus that demonstrated his extreme confidence, even at a young age. Darius had sent a messenger to Alexander with terms, basically to split Asia. The old commander Parmenius suggested accepting the terms, but the king replied, "So would I if I were Parmenius, but I am Alexander, I cannot." In 332 BCE he crossed into Egypt, and it would be in Egypt that he received validation that he was truly the son of Zeus. On June 10, 323 BCE, Alexander the Great died. Regrettably, Alexander had not named a successor or heir. With little alternative, his vast empire became divided amongst his commanders in a plan that resulted in 3 decades of conflict. While the commanders may have argued over their small pieces of territory, people reacted very differently throughout the empire. After hearing of his death, Macedonians cried and went running through the streets. Persians, as per their custom, shaved their heads. Darius' mother supposedly starved herself to death. Without anyone being capable of making a decision, the commander Perdiccas assumed control of the king's body, planning to return to Macedonia, where a tomb was prepared. In 322 BCE, the body began its long journey home. From Babylon to Damascus, people gathered along the roads. A team of 64 mules and a military guard accompanied the funeral cart. Alexander's gold coffin was adorned with sculptures and paintings, as well as jewels. Unfortunately, the king would never reach Macedon. Ptolemy, the regent of Egypt, kidnapped it and took it to Memphis. This theft was one of the many incidents that brought Ptolemy and Perdiccas to war, but after 3 failed attempts to invade Egypt, Perdiccas was killed by his own troops. The wars of the Diadochi would continue, and Alexander's vast empire would never be reunited. In 316 BCE, his mother, wife, and son would ultimately die at the orders of Cassander, the regent of his homeland Macedon. While his empire did not flourish after him, Alexander's memory certainly did. Although many consider him an icon, there are others who see him as both a hero and a villain. To those who admire him, he changed the world. He brought Greek culture and Hellenistic age to Asia, and in some minds laid the foundations for Christianity. The great empire he built spread Greek philosophy, art, and literature. Decades later, after invading and defeating Greece in the Macedonian Wars, the Romans benefited from Alexander and the Greeks, as educated Romans learned Greek. They hired Greek tutors for their children. Many of the more affluent Romans sent their sons to study in Athens. Even the Roman religion was heavily influenced by the gods of Olympus. To those great commanders who follow him, such as Hannibal and Julius Caesar, Alexander was the yardstick against whom they measured their own victories. Hannibal called him the greatest general of all time, while Caesar wept at the sight of Alexander's statue. Whether or not Alexander was a god, or if he believed himself to be one, his accomplishments have stood the test of time, and he is still admired by students of history more than 2 millennia after his passing. See you next time.